My name is David Butler. Some folks in the creative scene across the state know me as Dave Has Wings. I am a Charlotte native, born and raised here. What you're a part of tonight is something that's pretty big for me personally in my career, as well as I think it's going to be big for the gallery as well and its involvement, which is why we're having this kind of bit of programming before we kick it off. And that announcement will happen throughout the conversation. It'll kind of unfold. But the biggest thing is really, I started, this is being recorded because I started a podcast in 2019 called Here and Doing Things. I was talking to creative entrepreneurs, artists, really just picking their brain about their journey. I know what my journey was like, so just finding synergies, just finding ways to give back extra information to other creative entrepreneurs and kind of build community around a brand that I started called Analogue Luxury. Analogue Luxury houses all of my creative ideas. And today is the first day of 2 events. So the next event is going to be tomorrow, 5:30 at Hooga at Camp North End. And the reason it's entitled Still Here and Doing Things for this specific event is just because it is a story of perseverance. When I started Here and Doing Things, it was a project to do 12 episodes and work with 12 artists or creatives, one per month throughout 2019. So at that time, before I was full-time, creative entrepreneur, I was still working a job and all that kind of stuff. And the schedules got kind of crazy. I made it through 2019 with 7 episodes, and then COVID hit at the top of 2020, so I didn't get to finish the season. So these 2 days, I'm going to finish the episodes with this conversation as well as 3 conversations tomorrow. And then also we're announcing that we're kind of launching Analogue Luxury inside of Low-K, which is a retail collective that lives at Camp North End at the Hooga location at Camp North End. So it's kind of a big smash to end the year, as well as announcing the project that we'll talk about tonight that involves myself, my brand, and Elder Gallery. And then Justin's here to kind of help guide us through that conversation. So this is not how we envisioned starting it, but I wanted to give you all that context just so that everyone understands how and why we're in the room. So yeah, we're here. Conversation amongst friends, family. So I'm going to pass to Justin and let him do his thing so that I can stop rambling. But thank you all for coming out tonight. It really means a lot.
For sure. So obviously Justin Hicks, curator and visual artist here in the city, independent right now, just continuing to build. So this is like we're all in the living room together just having a conversation, just chopping. So it's really cool to be able to be out here. But I wanted to set the tone and kind of pick your brain, Dave, just because, you've had your hand in a lot of different spaces creatively, but obviously you came out of school at Winston-Salem State with business administration, stepping into the corporate space. What drove you in the beginning, man, to pursue fine art as a start?
Got you. So I didn't originally have an interest in fine art. Originally, I had always kind of done photography growing up. Photography is my medium. So I had always been a photographer growing up, just in terms of just documenting things, right? Like growing up with social media and all that kind of stuff, MySpace, High Five, all those kind of early social media platforms. When I got to college, I realized that there's the world of commercial photography where I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of document what's happening on campus, and people will, in some way, shape, or form, pay me to be able to do that, right? So my entrepreneurial kind of brain started to fire off. So it really started as kind of like a side hustle in school. And over time, I developed a passion for being able to push stories to the next level. And that's where I found that the fine art space would be kind of a more appropriate space for that, because you don't necessarily have to worry about the profitability. So I think, I'll see where else you want to go with the conversation, but that's kind of the start of it. I didn't start out wanting to be a fine artist. I started off as more of a commercial photographer and wanting to be more of a creative entrepreneur.
Yep.
And over time, it developed into a love for fine art and appreciation for fine art spaces and wanting to put my perspective within those spaces.
Definitely. And you mentioned being a visual storyteller with photography. Obviously, you're a big fan of vintage Polaroids, 35 millimeters, things like that. What drove you specifically to that medium and guided your focus in the beginning?
So crazy enough, right? You see, it's a lineage of things. I started, you're oh, I want to take pictures for a living. Mm-hmm. But then you find out the hurdles of having to take pictures for a living. And you get into a space where something that you love and you're passionate about starts to really drain you. So you have to find another way to be able to interact with it. So what happened was I left Coca-Cola at the end of 2014. I worked for Coke Consolidated here locally in the supply chain planning office. And I left at the end of 2014, and I had started my first company, the Featherbed, during that time. In February of that year, April of 2014, I started the company, and then I left in December. So I had a few months where I had always been building my brand in the city. I was showing love, I was documenting events, I was posting people's flyers to events, really just doing what I could to build the community here and contribute to the creative community that was existing, through documentation and a blog and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I left Coca-Cola and ended up working retail because I was thinking I could be close to the brands that I wanted to be working with and kind of take commercial photos of and all that kind of stuff. And that eventually led me to working for a retail company that's based here called the Whitaker Group. So now, at the time, they had maybe 7, 8 stores. Now there's 22 stores. So during that time, I came in as an e-commerce photographer. I was their first kind of like creative hire in the area. And I went from, I started off like taking like regular white background stuff and building up the website. So that was my initial job. So when you're shooting and editing for 12 hours a day and you're doing nothing but white background stuff and you're just in Photoshop cutting stuff out on white backgrounds, you get drained really, really quickly, right? And on top of kind of some of the other things, because the company was still very lean and very, very early on in its growth. So not only was I taking and editing photos, but because I had been building my own brand and had done a couple of just kind of like random projects for like a professor in college and having my own brand and having built my own websites, I was able to take orders, fulfill orders, because I had kind of like customer service experience. I was able to kind of answer emails. So I was kind of being a one-man department. Mm-hmm. So that kind of led me to like, man, I still love photography and I'm getting to do it for a living. It's not how I envisioned it, but I want a way for it to still be creative and I can still be passionate about it. So I was thinking like, what's the way that I can, participate in take photos without having to edit them and put them in a computer and take my big DSLR everywhere. And that's when I got reintroduced to Polaroid film. So when I was working at Urban Outfitters, it was the second to last retailer. I worked at Urban, and then I ended up at Lids in South Park Mall. And I got a Polaroid camera when I was working at Urban Outfitters. And I was like, this is it right here. And then I started to really look on the internet. This is still around the end of the Tumblr era. So I was really starting to see that like there are people who are, using Polaroid to document in the same way that I was using digital to document when I really, got interested and picked up my passion for photography. So Polaroids, 35 millimeter disposable film. Eventually I want to get into, medium format, large format. They do have like 8x10 Polaroids and stuff like that as well. So that's where that, along with using puzzles as a medium, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit, it's kind of like where the trajectory or like the root of my fine art practice and where I'll be going into the future. But yeah, that's how I kind of got introduced to that medium, or how that became kind of a mainstay and kind of became my focus. It was just wanting to have a creative outlet, because I was still doing creative things for a living, but that specific outlet was like kind of draining.
For sure. And like various exhibitions and projects that you've worked on, from Brook Hill to Home Charlotte, like talk more about those experiences, and what were some of the barriers that you felt like you faced once you did step into the fine art space and really try to utilize your photography, your medium, like in that direction and in that avenue?
Well, I wouldn't say so. The hardest part is like getting in, right? Mm-hmm. And when you have big homies who are like intent on looking out for you and giving you information and making sure you have platform and opportunity because they see what you're capable of, it was never about the work not being good enough. It was just about getting an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention people like Kyle Mosier, people like Alvin C. Jacobs Jr., because without them, I wouldn't have the understanding of the fine art world that I have, nor would I have the opportunities to have worked in these spaces. Right. So Home as well, the first iteration of Home. But Brook Hill, Welcome to Brook Hill, was actually Alvin's photography project that was happening at Harvey B. Gantt Center a few years ago. And they were having trouble figuring out how they were going to lay out the space, because some institutions do it differently, but the way that the Gantt operates is they turn over all their exhibitions at one time. So your curators, your gallery managers, your exhibition managers, everybody's burned out because you're spending 2 months and you're flipping 3 or 4 spaces at a time. Right. And so this was going to be their flagship exhibition, and they were just kind of like banging their head on the wall trying to figure out exactly how they were going to execute on the design of the exhibition, how they were going to tell stories. Well, because I had been doing pop-up shops and independent events and been thinking about things from my retail background, I was literally just meeting up with Alvin like we normally would have. We met at Basel Coffee, and we were just linking up, and he was like, yeah, man, they're having kind of trouble to figure this out. And I was like, I could do that. And he was like, word? And I was like, yeah, man, designing spaces is the same thing. Like, you have the same type of intent, which is to, again, tell stories. You want to think about how you want people to use the space. That's the same thing that you want to do at retail, except you're displaying product instead of art. And he was like, you ready to, you think you can do it? I was like, yeah, I can definitely do it. So we literally left there, went down to the Gantt. He pulled the exhibition manager out of a meeting and said, hey, Dave can solve this problem for us.
Nice.
So they were like, we can't pay you for a proposal, but if you make a pitch on what you think, the direction we should go in, we might be able to make something work and bring you onto the project because we have a little bit of budget left. So I was like, all right, cool. I literally turned the project in 24 hours. So I went home, I asked them for a breakdown of what the space was and like kind of the measurements and all that kind of stuff. And I used a program called SketchUp to literally, I talked to Alvin a little bit. Obviously, I've been hearing about it too. And matter of fact, let me back up a little bit because I was introduced to the project before this formal opportunity came as well. I had to go take some photos for Alvin. They were having a friends and family day out in Brook Hill. So Alvin asked me to cover it for him because he was at every kind of major thing that was happening there while documenting individual stories. But he had a family situation that had him go back to Illinois. So he said, hey, this friends and family day is going. Will you go document this for me and, just send me the images and let me know what who you talk to, like just contribute to the project in that way. And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. So I went out there, friends and family day, kicked it, was hanging out, was cookout, took a couple photos, sent those over to him. I didn't think anything of it. So I had context on the project. I got a little bit more context on how he was approaching the project, got measurements of the space, and went home and literally just kind of banged out. Like, everything just came to me, so I just banged everything out. And so I hit Alvin back the next day, and I was like, yo, the layout's done. And he was like, what do you mean the layout's done?
Yeah, right.
I was like, no, like, it's done. You know what I mean? So I showed it to him, and he was like, nah, this is it. Like, This is dope. He was like, but like, let's give it an extra day before we take it over there. Right. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, hey, cool, whatever however you think it needs to work, like, you got the relationship. So, it just speaks to being able to be prepared and being able to know that your previous experiences are going to be able to catapult you and prepare you for those next experiences. So it may seem like those days of like folding t-shirts and like restocking hats and doing all that kind of stuff was like, kind of like menial or beneath me because I had a degree or like whatever people may think about something like that. But for me, I'm studying the space. I'm looking at how people are using the space. I'm talking to the merchandisers that are building the displays. I'm doing all of those things, and all of that is informing what prepared me to be for that opportunity. So again, like, it's not about, it's never really about the skill set as much as it is a lot of times the opportunity. So once I got in, like, the thing started to kind of click because I had been doing the work of wanting to understand my medium, wanting to understand myself, wanting to be able to talk about my work, wanting to be able to apply my other skill sets to this space. So all I needed was an opportunity, and once I got the opportunity, it was up from there.
Right. No, it's fire. You ever seen that Hoes meme, by the way? Like, I can fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's literally you in that situation.
Yeah, it was epic, man, and it was to be able to. I really appreciate that. Me and Alvin actually were named 2018 Charlotte Teens of the Year by Charlotte Magazine for that. So to be able to be a part of that project in my hometown and covering what that story covered was like super meaningful. So for that to be my introduction into the fine art world and into museum spaces was super, super meaningful, but just because of like just the context of that entire situation.
Right, that's awesome. You've mentioned in previous interviews before, like, they asked, like, well, who is Dave? What does Dave do? You mentioned how, like, for you, it's like human agency. Mm-hmm. That's what you define. Like, Dave's the human, and I'm also an agency. What does that mean? Like, how would you describe that to the people here?
Well, it's twofold. It's kind of a double entendre. I still definitely use that. That's my go-to. A human agent. I'm a human agency, hopefully providing other humans agency. So it's kind of like my goal is, and everything that I've done up until this point in my career has been really about providing platform and opportunity for others while also trying to create room for myself. Mm-hmm. I came home from college and really wanted to, again, explore creative entrepreneurship, explore creative spaces, but I kind of felt like I was hitting a barrier with having access to those things.
Right.
And I was pretty vocal about the barriers that I was experiencing, right? And that led me into understanding some of the other systemic barriers that are a lot more important than being able to have your art on walls, like, where kids go to school, healthcare, like all these different things started to come out. And because of going further into my experience, I graduated as student body president at Winston-Salem State. So being student body president at a mid-level, historically black institution that's state funded, you have to pay attention to state politics, municipal and local politics. So I had the experience of being able to understand how these things were, have some of that experience coming back home. So I was able to see how and where some of these gaps existed and was able to kind of bridge the gap between these kind of spaces like these Charlotte Magazine talks where they're talking about, like, I remember they used to have to discuss CLT all the time, and I would literally go there and like show up, present as myself, 100% authentic, and just ask the most thought-provoking question I could as relates to the conversation. Right. And that kind of started to get people's like heads turning, like, okay, who is this guy and what is he talking about? Because he keeps showing up and asking these crazy, specific, poignant questions. And it's I kind of lost where I was going. I ain't gonna hold you.
No, you good.
What was the question?
Good. Human agency.
Oh yeah. So going into being in those environments, you start. It's been that. My career has been nothing but that.
Right.
Everything that we do with Hugh House, which is a creative agency I co-own, is that like it's literally about creating space for other humans to be able to have agency and make decisions about what they want to do. Specifically, creative people, what they want to do with their life. Mm-hmm. Do you want to be a fine artist? Do you want to be in the commercial space? Do you know what that means for you? So for me, I hold those two words extremely close and dear because of that. Like, I want people to be able to approach things the way that I saw myself being able to approach things, which is, again, understanding the environment, understanding yourself, and to be able to make a decision. And there are a lot of things in the world that do not allow for you to make, or that your decision's already made for you, right, if you allow it to be that way. So, yes, very much so, human and agency is that's it, and that's why.
Right.
Because of my experience and just wanting everybody else to be able to make those same decisions, or to be able to craft, to give them the tools to be able to craft whatever it is they want out of their life or creative practice. Right. Specifically creative people, and specifically creative black people.
And it's never linear. Like, there's never like A to B. I feel like for you especially, you've navigated different spaces. How did you feel like, do you ever battle with like imposter syndrome or navigating that mindset, especially, from the fine art space to working in retail to working, creative direction on, a corporate level? How did you navigate those spaces, knowing the different skill sets that you're able to apply in all avenues?
Well, I think, my brain is going all over the place. So, one, I wouldn't say I deal with imposter syndrome. I definitely deal with, I can't believe this is actually happening.
Got you.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like, wow,
right.
This is my life, right? This is insane. Like, I can't believe these goals are actually being checked off. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's never really like am I supposed to be here? It's like, I know that I'm supposed to be here. I'm comfortable with the work that I'm creating. I know I've put in hours. Like, this goes all the way back to like my sister buying me my first pair of Jordans. You know what I'm saying? Like, ever since then, like, all of those moments have led up to this, right? Mm-hmm. So it's never about feeling some way about being in the room, but I am always super, super grateful and thankful for the opportunities that come and for the opportunities that are created, and for people who, again, like I said, create platform and do more, and also do that work around the city of tilling the soil for us to continue to be able to push things forward. Sure. So for me, it's never. I want us to kind of, I feel like that's like trending right now. I feel like a lot of people are kind of talking about imposter syndrome, and I think that's very real for a lot of people. It's just not me, because I know where I come from. I know the other folks that are putting in the work, and we just want to create more space for people to be able to do that. So yeah, I think, it's the second thing I was going to say about that is it's more about, I think this is where a lot of other folks get lost, is understanding where the context in which, or knowing when to apply which skill set, right? So I may be a really good photographer, but what this person might actually need is a business strategy. Yeah. I may be a really good strategist, but what this person might actually need is actually really great images. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's about being able to understand when to apply the right skill set so that you're bringing value to whatever relationship that is. Right. And that's what continues to open doors and create more opportunities. And once you're able to most quickly identify and have conversations with people, understand, oh, you're in need of this. This is where I can fill that gap. And then you lock in on doing that, you become extremely efficient, and everything, all other resources start to flow out of that, whether it's money, time, additional relationships, platform, access to spaces. It's about knowing how to appropriately leverage yourself. And that reminds me of a quote. Shout out to my homie Eric Hurtgen. He used to be based here in Charlotte. Now he's based in Kentucky, I believe. and he moved out there to be with family. But he used to, when I was kind of in that struggle from 2015 to 2018, trying to figuring things out, he would just like take me and we just go get Chipotle bowls. That was like our thing. We just go get Chipotle, and he'd always pay for it.
What's your go-to? Go-to combo.
It's a burrito bowl, chicken or steak, depending on how I'm feeling.
Nice.
Always black beans, never
Yes,
pinto.
Easy.
Brown rice.
Yep.
And then corn, going guac if I'm feeling fancy.
Got you.
Lettuce.
Okay.
And then depending on how I'm feeling that day, I might get all 3 sauces.
Fire.
But normally it's mild and medium.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Not a spicy guy?
I am sometimes. It just depends on the mood. You know what I'm saying? So
Facts.
depends on how I want to feel the next day too. If you know what I'm saying.
Right.
But yeah, we would sit down and he gave me one of the most fundamental pieces of information. He said there are 4 types of people in every kind of like business transaction or value transaction. You have a person who's getting paid for their time. You have a person who's getting paid for their money. You have a person who's getting paid for their ideas. And there's a person, what is it, time, money, ideas. Of course, it's escaping me right now. Time, money, ideas, and give me a second. Relationships. So there are generally those 4 types of people. So you have a person that's getting paid for their time, a person that's getting paid for their money, a person that's getting paid for their ideas, and a person that's getting paid for their relationships. Your responsibility in that interaction or that value exchange, that business transaction, is to figure out which person you are and to be able to put a value on that.
Gotcha.
And once I realized that, I was like, okay, cool. Sometimes you don't need to go in and say, this is everything I can do, because then people can get lost. Understand what the need is, and if you can feel that need, be able to clearly articulate, I can fulfill this need, and then be able to understand the value that you want to receive for facilitating or executing for that person or within that transaction or that relationship.
Dope.
And for me, that's kind of been a fundamental mentality that I apply when meeting new people, when operating Hugh House with my partners, when we're doing things with the block and our community arm, and how I think about my art is in the space, the story that I want to tell, what's the value that I'm bringing, and where does that fit into a greater narrative, right? Because as an artist, you don't get to come in and be the curator all the time. Like sometimes you get to curate and you get to have your art up, but a lot of times you're either telling the story and kind of helping guide and put pieces into that story, or you're just a piece to be put into that story, and both sides are fine. So for me, it's about knowing how to navigate that and when to navigate that. So
For sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to go back to like community and being able to navigate in different spaces, but I really wanted to highlight on specifically your brand, Analogue Luxury. What was the mission behind that, and what kind of drove the narrative for you to step into that space?
So it was really me trying to, so I was a part of an exhibition here at Elder called Home at the end of 2020. November 2020 is when it opened, and it ran until I think January or February of this year. And I didn't consider or call myself an artist, or didn't feel like I was an artist until I was in that show. And it didn't have anything to do with the space, it didn't have anything to do with that. It had to do with me understanding my work, having a medium that I was comfortable with, having the appropriate story, and being able to articulate that and tell that to someone else, right? That's when I felt like I was an artist. Anybody I feel like can make anything, but specifically in understanding the fine art space. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, you see something on the wall, you're like, I could do that. It's like, you could have, but you didn't, right? Because you don't have the experiences that that artist has. You don't know the story that's behind that piece. You don't know the story behind why they use the certain materials. All of that stuff is extremely important in fine art. That's what literally sells the art. So for me, Analogue Luxury was searching for that narrative, or what is that mentality that I'm putting into all of my work. And it comes from this appreciation for the way things used to be made, and the way how things were crafted and they take time. Like I wish I knew how to work with my hands, how some, people like yeah, my granddad or my great granddad like built this house, like did everything from the ground up.
Right.
Like I kind of wish that our generation had some of that. And there's some people that do, obviously, but I think I would say the mass majority of people who are like millennials and younger aren't building things with their hands in that way. So there's everything, even down to and that goes even back to my first company named The Featherbed, that used to be like the highest quality of things that you could have as a feather bed or a feather pillow at some point in time. So having an appreciation, Analogue is having that appreciation for the way things are made in that older context. And then luxury is all of the contemporary pieces that we have access to today, right? So internet, technology, being able to push things forward. And the mindset is being able to make things in a contemporary context, but be able to tell stories and pay attention to those details the same way that a craftsman would when they're making something. So that's the root and the thought process behind Analogue Luxury, and that came out of me searching for a way to put together stories around the art and the photos that I was taking, and that even goes back to why film fits into the story a bit better, because those pictures have to be developed, right? And that's something another thing that I want to be able to add to my skill set is being able to develop my own film, right? And be able to take it from A to Z. Like, these are things that I'm still learning and growing as an artist, and I've been working at this specific thing in terms of calling myself and being an artist for 5 years. Right. And I don't think people really understand that process, really. I think a lot of times it gets kind of like misconstrued, especially in an age where everything is happening so quickly and you can share. And if you're talented or if you can build community, you can have success rather quickly in some instances. But that's not the majority of people. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times you need to be able to put in those hours and learn what you need to learn to be able to go to the next level. So that's kind of the thought process that makes up Analogue Luxury is, again, appreciation and thought processes that are extremely old school, but like in a contemporary context that we can exist in and appreciate today, and using the efficiencies of the context that we have today.
For sure. You mentioned too the importance of relationships, and obviously with Home CLT, that was a huge opportunity working with Sonia and being able to connect with her. Obviously she's not here right now, but kind of walk us through that relationship with Sonia and how it forged you stepping into the Elder Gallery space and continuing to build projects from the ground up.
Yep, and I want to make a quick distinction. Home CLT happened at the Levine Museum.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there were two. No, all good. So there were two iterations of Home. One of them was Home CLT, where we were telling specific stories of different neighborhoods around the city at the Levine Museum. And then the second iteration of Home CLT was Brooklyn, a city within a city, which was an interactive exhibition. Actually, both of them were interactive and used AR technology. And I was able to do I worked in collaboration with Lloyd Visuals for Brooklyn. And then for the first one, I did all the video work myself. And essentially, when you would walk through those exhibitions, you would put up the iPads that they had, and then the video would start playing. So we shot the videos that were inside the AR technology that the Levine Museum was leveraging. But for Home, which was the show here at Elder, that relationship came out of, again, being able to having relationship with other artists, with other creatives, really just vibing out, because I came to Elder, my first time being introduced to the space right after Sonia bought the gallery. I was brought here by Kyle Mosier to be a part of an artist talk that he did for the Millennial Arts Program. And if you get a second, you should go on YouTube and watch the conversation that I had with Kyle. We shot an episode of Here and Doing Things. He was I think he might have been like the second or third episode. Super amazing, full-time fine artist based here in Charlotte, does a lot of murals now, multidisciplinary, but he's based in painting, has a signature style, he does great work. He's also been in a couple exhibitions here off the plantation, 1 and 2, which also happened here at Elder. But yeah, so I came here specifically to help Kyle with his artist talk, because the same reason why we're having a conversation is the same reason why Kyle wanted to have a conversation, because he and I would vibe out and have conversations all the time, and talking about art and things, it's easier for it to be conversational versus like trying to give a lecture. You know what I'm saying? Like stand up here by yourself and talk about your practice. Like it's just kind of like, it just feels, for me at least, and I know for Kyle he has the same sentiment, or has in the past, like it's just weird. You know what I mean? So he was like, hey, I want you to come like help me do this Millennial Art Program talk, like just the same way if we were like vibing out in the house, like, you know, like let's do it like that. So I was like, all right, cool. So I came here. It went really, really well, and afterwards had a conversation. Sonia reached out and said, hey, you know, great job with Kyle's talk. Really appreciate you guys doing that, and, you know, I want to grab some time with you. So I think we did like coffee, and then we did lunch, and it was just kind of an exchanging of stories, and she was telling me about, you know, her background and, you know, being a civil rights attorney and like everything that she was experiencing, being a public defender, and why she bought the gallery and how she wanted the gallery to be more of a space to kind of tackle those same issues, but to use creativity and art in more of a kind of a underlying like sneaky way, and you know, to really diversify what was happening in the creative scene and be able to create more space for more people to do more things and challenge more narratives. And that really resonated with me, obviously. Like I said, my entire career has been that. Everything that's for-profit to non-profit to art, it's all that. So you start to see those synergies, and over time, you start to figure out, okay, how can we collaborate? And it was just that. She was like, hey, like, I have this show coming up called Home. You're a native. I would love to have you work in the show. Your photography's great. Because I had shown her some stuff from my archive, things I had been shooting, for 4 or 5 years, things I was just sitting on, didn't know what I was going to do with. I'm just kind of documenting and living life. And she offered me that opportunity. And it was originally supposed to be in May of 2020, but it got pushed to November because of the pandemic. So it was really just an ongoing relationship of just continuing to have those conversations of understanding the why for both of us. And then, she felt like I would be a good fit for the Home show and offered that to me. And that was kind of that's when the relationship kind of became formalized in like a fine art context.
Dope. And you obviously mentioning just continuing to build the importance of agency, but also community. What do you feel like that specific moment working in Home and like building out that gallery space, that exhibition, what did that show you in that moment? Like, what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so Home was a group show, so I didn't like build out the full exhibition.
Yeah.
So that was curated. I'm not sure who curated it on the staff here. So I was just an artist as a part of the group show. Mm-hmm. But what it allowed for me to do, and what the pandemic gave me, was time to really take my medium to the next level, mm-hmm. and that's where puzzles became a very large part of my motif. So that show really caused me, because I never really wanted to. I felt like it wasn't, for me at least, it wasn't visually interesting enough for me to simply just take my photos, put the work on the wall, frame it really nice, mat it really nice, and just have it up there. Obviously, images can still be very, very powerful that way. For me, I feel like with everybody having a camera in their pocket now, like those kind of, it's very, very, the ability to tell a story is kind of lost on people with a single image because we see so many images. Right. So I was trying to find a way to make my photography be unlike any other thing that I had really seen. And I was sitting at home during the pandemic. I ordered a puzzle for my favorite streetwear brand, The Hundreds. I had seen a couple puzzles on my Instagram timeline, Heinz put out a puzzle. It was featured on Hypebeast or High Snob or something. So there was this perfectly Heinz red ketchup color puzzle. So it's a really hard puzzle because the entire puzzle is one color, you know what I mean? But it's Heinz ketchup red. So I was just seeing all these things and taking all these things in, and then it kind of hit me. But I don't know about you guys, but my best ideas come in the shower. So I was standing in the shower, and it smacked me a ton of bricks, puzzles, bro. Blow the puzzles up, make the puzzles the thing. So, and some of those pieces are still here. They're in the collector's room, in the event space that's behind the gallery right now. But I had this vision of being able to change the context of an image by using a puzzle piece cutout and then giving that scale. So what happened was I went to the same guy that we worked on Welcome to Brookhill, the same fabricator, Kenny Color, Kenny Flippin. He's second, third generation print guy. He does a lot of the stuff for the museums in town. He can print on anything, can cut out anything. And I went to him and said, hey, I'm thinking I want to cut out plexiglass puzzle pieces. And I want to adhere a die cut part of my photography to it. And he was like, yeah, we can do that. So I was like, all right, tight. So for me, that allowed me to I started to sit on okay, what does that mean though? What is that? Puzzle pieces, cool, you got a way to execute it, but what is that? What are you really saying with that? And it really just, with the images that I had, and because everything is so kind of documentary and kind of just documenting life, chilling, a lot of my archive was that. It was, people, places, things, they're all pieces to our own personal puzzle and our own journey. And the people that you meet, the relationships that you make, the things that you make, they're all pieces that create this large picture that becomes our lives. And I could also change the context of the image, because if I'm cutting out a piece of the image, you don't know what that entire image is like. And then I started to think about how no matter your age range, you could understand a jigsaw puzzle. Right. And then when you get into the cultural context of there being puzzles in other cultures that, we know a traditional jigsaw puzzle, but Chinese puzzles look completely different. You know what I'm saying? And then, so my brain started to really go crazy, and I was like, I think I got something here. And then once I executed the work, and I got to see that big 4-foot, 3-foot puzzle piece, like cut out of orange. Orange is my color, by the way. Cut out of orange plexiglass, and I got to see these different pieces from, my time in Charlotte, and these things that meant something to me as growing up as a black man in the South, growing up as a Charlotte native, and being able to tell those stories through these puzzle pieces. That's when I was like, okay, no, this is it, and that is what home gave me. Home gave me the opportunity to really take my work to the next level and think about it in a specific, and develop the context around it that would like create the platform for where the work is headed now. Sure. Because I knew why I was taking photos. I knew I enjoyed capturing moments. I knew I enjoyed having those different things and telling those stories of people that I was interacting with. But to be able to add that next layer, that like when it's up on the wall and someone comes in, they're kind of like, you get that head tilt moment. You know what I mean? Like when you ask an interesting question or you see something that kind of intrigues you, you get that like that's what the puzzle pieces gave me. That's what home gave me, and that's why I was super grateful for that opportunity.
That's awesome. And now, like, you're in a space where you're just continuing to do the work and continue to apply your narrative. Which is why we're essentially all here. What is this project we have coming up? For people that don't know about like NFTs, the metaverse, the blockchain, things like that, how are you utilizing this project to incorporate within this?
Yeah, man. So, again, just in terms of like thinking about relationships, how you can bring additional value. After Home came down and they rotated the show, I just reached back out to Sonia. We had a great time, working on Home together, and I reached out to her and said, hey, how can we continue to collaborate? Like, what are some of your pain points about the gallery? Like, what are you experiencing with the space? Are there stories that you're looking to tell? Like, how can we, continue to build on our relationship? And she was like, yeah, no, you were a joy to work with. Like, I'm super open. Like, and she mentioned the Small Works Gallery, which is this room that's like right here. It has its own door. It's got like kind of the glass up top right here. So that's the Small Works Gallery. She was like, I don't really know what to do with it. She says like, I put Small Works in there, kind of like trinkets to sell. I've put jewelry in there. I've done this, I've done that. But, I don't really have a real meaning or a focus for that space. And it's just kind of there. And I was like, would you be open to me like curating something of my own in that space? And she was like, yeah, no, 100%. So, like, just let me know whatever you're thinking, and, we'll figure it out. So this is still, obviously, pandemic. Everybody's still at home. I'm on Clubhouse. Everybody knows Clubhouse was, like, alive for, like, 3 months, where it was, like, really, really dope. And then Twitter was like, we got spaces, and just came and, like, stepped on them. But, yeah, so I was spending a lot of time on Clubhouse, and around this time, like, NFTs really started to kind of, like, break. And there were a lot of rooms around NFTs. I started to see a lot of homies in the space. And I was like, I had watched, there's a really good kind of like fundamental documentary that I watched a while ago, actually, called Banking on Bitcoin, which was my introduction to blockchain technology. And I'm by no means an expert by any of this. Like, what we're about to talk about and what we're about to announce is creating space for myself and other artists to figure out more about the space. But that was my introduction to it. So when I heard like, oh yeah, this is like a next level or layers on top of like blockchain, I was like, okay, so like, and it was being manifested in these most recent cases as like digital images, or put specifically for creativity and art, is where it's the space that it's being leveraged in currently. Right. Because I think a lot of times people are making NFTs and art synonymous, when from a technical perspective, they're two different things. And we'll talk about that some more, I'm sure. But yeah, so I was in a couple Clubhouse rooms hearing about NFTs. One of the homies, Black Dave, down in South Carolina from Charleston, was like super heavy in NFTs. The homie Herman, who will definitely be mentioned some more, Herman Marney, who used to be Director of Visitor Experience and Technology at the Gantt. He's now in DC at the Black Smithsonian. He was in the finance space prior to getting in the cultural space. So he was, doing a lot community-wise as far as NFTs and having conversations and stuff. So I was just kind of listening. And met a couple, made a couple new relationships and made some new friends on Clubhouse. And the decentralization and the democratization was the biggest piece that really attracted me to it. Like the fact that you could, through these smart contracts that you develop, set yourself to have a royalty as an artist, And anytime that digital asset is traded, you automatically receive your value. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no questions. There's no lawyers. There's nothing. The technology handles all of that. So traditionally in the fine art space, if you as my collector bought my work for 10 grand, right? And then I continue to build my profile and you get to the point where you go to auction or you sell that to another collector and it goes for 50 grand, there's a 40 grand increase there, but the artist traditionally doesn't receive any of those royalties in most cases. Right. Well, with NFTs and blockchain, because it's written into the smart contract, you automatically get that royalty. That is extremely interesting to me and extremely interesting to anybody who does anything creative, because at that point, there's no conversation. You can't screw me because there's this decentralized network of computers is handling all of that, and I wrote it into my smart contract, and it's done. So that was my first time hearing about NFTs. The utility of that made me very, very interested in what that could look like. And I was like, I want to learn more about this space, and I want to do it in a way that allows for us to bridge some of the gaps and kind of break down some of the barriers that exist currently within the fine art space. So I like to call them like quantum leaps. So not only are through this project, which I'm going to give the name in a second, through this project will we connect emerging and mid-level artists to institutions and have their work in these institutions, independent spaces, gallery spaces. But let's go ahead and place you 20 or 30 years into the future. I fundamentally believe personally that we're maybe 15, 20, 30 years from like mass adoption where like a large amount of cryptocurrencies are accepted everywhere. Like you can go to Harris Teeter and buy your groceries with like Ethereum or Bitcoin or something like that. Right. I think we're 20 or 30 years away from that, but when everybody has like their USD debit card and like their crypto card. Like I think we're a ways from that. So in this meantime, in this next couple of decades, let's go ahead and bridge some of those gaps and let's make some stuff happen IRL, but let's also go ahead and get ahead of that curve, because when you talk about access and when you talk about things being built, representation goes far beyond just like seeing somebody who looks like you do something, right? When you talk about people that are building fundamentally what the next layer of our society is going to look like, if those people don't look like you, you can guarantee that you're going to be left out of that conversation. So let's go ahead and do what we can to bridge some of these gaps and things that are happening IRL, but let's take it a step further and introduce you to the opportunity of using this technology to put yourself in that space and understand it as a part of your practice, so that, going back to my other point, when the world is there, you can know how to properly leverage yourself and have conversations to be able to provide for yourself, so that you're not getting caught up in a Web3 replication of what's already happening with Web2. So enter open court. Again, another like smack me in the head in the shower situation. I was like, we need a place where we can learn this game of NFTs and Web3 and all these different things. So that was the first thing that came to me, was like a space to learn the game. And I grew up playing sports. I grew up playing basketball and soccer. And when you think about things like open gym, or you think about like, you go to like a rec center, it's like, oh no, like the court's open, like go like work on your game, go play one-on-one, go like, you can go do whatever you want when you have an open court. Like the court's open, you can use it for whatever purposes you want. You can run sprints, like whatever it is that you want to work on. So there was kind of that. And then, and knowing that, also, I was going to be potentially partnering with Sonia for it. It was just, her background with being in courtrooms as a lawyer. Yeah. So there's this interesting tie in narrative and in name, where you have open court, which is now a fully funded series of exhibitions and an artist residency. The first iteration is going to happen here at Elder Gallery. It's going to be called Tethered, and it'll happen sometime in the first quarter of next year. But it's fully funded by the Knight Foundation, which I'm extremely excited about. I'll get to work with 15 artists, specifically Black artists, and we'll be able to, again, have them show their work in a number of established art spaces, while also mirroring some of their work on the blockchain using NFTs and minting their work. And for me, as a curator, as an artist, as someone who's building community, it is extremely humbling, and I'm extremely excited about the opportunity to be able to work with people who may be in a position that I was in a couple years ago, or maybe even ahead of me as far as a fine art career is concerned, but this new space is something that we can all explore together. So that's the big announcement. That's kind of like the big thing that like, it was kind of like anonymity, and like everybody's like, oh, what is it? Like, so I really appreciate you guys coming out with like very little description, because like for me, like that's the announcement. So I mean, we can give it up for that. Like I'm excited. That's the announcement. Is that Open Court is happening. Like I said, it's fully funded, and we are again working to bridge some gaps, not only with institutions here in the Charlotte arts community, but also again preparing artists for what the next couple decades of art and creative culture and creative business will look like. So
Dope. I'm going back to the conversation about the Knight Foundation. I think that's the one thing that artists can find in way of barriers is resources. So for you, what did you take me through? Like, how did you like navigate finding those resources, and what is some advice that you would give young artists as they're trying to build out platforms to scale and do the good work that we're called to do?
Excuse me. I would say you definitely want to, one, make sure you have enough reps, right? Like you want to make sure that you understand what's happening, right? Like as an artist, you should understand the role of a curator. You want to understand the role of a gallerist. You want to understand the role of a curator that's different at a gallery versus what it is at a museum space. You want to understand and push on what museums are here for and what galleries are here for. Like you want to constantly have that dialogue and have your own kind of rubric or thought process around these spaces, so that you can, again, understand where your value is and how to position yourself within the space. So that's first, is like get your reps in, like create the work, do some group shows, do some stuff independently, like throw your own shows. Like if you don't have any resources, like you always have like there's like time is a resource. If you don't have money, you have time. Like you have to get super scrappy. Like I did years of doing events and breaking even or losing money just for the sake of doing something creative and creating a platform for others, that whether it was music or other visual artists or whatever. So that, again, like prepared me to be able to have whatever conversation it is that I needed to have when I came across someone who had resources. And again, it's a long game, right? Like it came after I was first introduced to someone. I was probably introduced to like the thought of the Knight Foundation maybe like 4 years ago, and then like formally introduced to someone who actually worked there, like in the art space, because Charles Thomas, who's based here, he's not an arts representative. They have they have a department that specifically funds arts across the country, and that's not what Charles' job does. So he has very kind of like limited ability to be able to do what he can do because of his role. As far as like creative things, and he does a great job of doing what he can in his role, right? Like he does an amazing job at that. So I want to give a big shout out to Charles Thomas for that. But he, again, in him being intentional and knowing like there's a lot of things happening creatively. There's a lot of artists here that need access to those resources. He set up a mixer for the arts team at that time to come here and meet some artists. And I attended that. And that comes from, again, just being around, asking questions, taking meetings, like really, really like leaning into trying to figure those things out, right? Like you can't sit on the sidelines and then complain about not having something. You have to go out and find it and get it. So part of it was that, like it was being present, meeting people 3-4 times and not really having anything come from it. Not them, because people like, oh, you go meet with them. Like this person, they have access to this. And you're like, they might not understand truly what that role is, right? So it's your job to do that homework. So for me, it was, again, building those relationships, being in those rooms. And it still wasn't for another 3 years that I was able to be in position for a project like this to come to fruition. So after I talked to Sonia, she was like, yeah, let's go for it. I talked to another creative space here in the city, which they'll remain nameless for now because, signatures and things.
Right.
So after I had like 1.5 people on board here, I was like, okay, cool. Let me, add these things to a presentation or to like kind of like a little deck, and let me kind of, me and Sonia were trying to figure out how we're going to fund it, because I know that this is something that is I don't want to say extremely risky, because it's not extremely risky, but I know that it doesn't immediately just fit into the role of what a gallery does. Like this is exploration, exactly. This is an exploration of what this looks like. So I wanted to make sure that we could financially cover whoever was going to be involved, so that like she obviously runs this beautiful space. Like she has a staff, she has people, amazing people like Madison working here. Like we have to make sure they get paid and all those types of things. Like that's where my business mind kicks in, right? So I'm like let's not worry about trying to sell work to fund it. Like let's just figure out how we can fund it. So put everything down, all my thoughts down around the narrative of it, NFTs, obviously everybody in the creative space is talking about it. Put my thoughts down about it, put down why Elder is a good partner, put down potentially why this other space is a good partner, and was just gonna start like shopping it around. So I had built a relationship with one of the arts representatives from the Knight Foundation. And I reached out to him and said, hey, I just would like to grab some time in your calendar so that we can catch up. I want to see what the foundation's working on, see things that they're funding, where their interest, and I'll let you know what I have going on, and hope, if there's synergy, cool. If not, it's just good to know because I might be able to send some more things your way. Like, just genuinely being able to understand what's happening with people and relationships as opposed to just like trying to get your thing done is like, again, another way to provide value. So I reached out and they were like, yeah, let's grab some time. And so gave them a whole rundown of everything. I was still working full time at the Whitaker Group at that time. And I was like, yeah, I got Whitaker Group going on. Hugh House had launched and was picking up. And I was like, I've got this art thing going on. I just had this show at Elder and like things went really well. And so I was like, what's going on with the foundation? She's like, well, they're really thinking about like, what does it look like to really fund art and technology? Like, everybody's at home, this, that, and the third. Like, everybody's trying to figure out what this intersection looks like. And I said, you don't say. Really? Well, I'm gonna send you a PDF, and you let me know what you think about it. Right. You know what I mean? So I gave her kind of a brief rundown of like, hey, this is kind of what I was thinking, and she's like, that sounds very interesting and in line with what we're doing. Send me your PDF. So from there, it was just a series of conversations and continuing to push the ideas before it was, I was given the opportunity to apply for a grant, and it's just the value that for me, that's what it's the long game. Like, that's 3 years worth of relationship coming to a head to be able to have this opportunity. And for me, it's extremely important to not hoard this opportunity for myself or trying to I just want to do this show. Like, no, how can I make this as big as an opportunity for myself, for other artists, for Charlotte's creative scene as a whole, right? Because I know there are so many people who are clawing and fighting to make sure that the creative presence is known, that the creative culture is seen and known here, right? So because I was able to add some of that scale, again, other relationships, right? Like the fact that again, things coming to a head. Like, I've known Garrett since the first Hooga location was opened. Me and Joshua Galloway walked into, he's also known as Aurelius, or the Creative Gent, super dope commercial photographer who's based here. And we walked into the first Hooga just like, yo, what is this place? How did you build it? How did you pay for it? Like, just asking him questions. And Garrett at the time was opening Hooga and running his own marketing agency. And he was an open book. He was like, well, we kind of did this and we thought about this and this. And I've consistently just continued to just catch up in appreciation for people who are building creative community, within the city and continue to build that relationship. So when I say, how can I do what I can to make this a full-blown residency, it's like, let me partner with Hooga and use their space to be able to have spaces where we can meet, to be able to use their podcast studio and document things via audio, to be able to rent their rooms and turn them into studios to take photos of people's work, to be able to have spaces just to ideate, right? Like, again, that's another 4 or 5 year relationship that fits in perfectly here. They just happen to be starting a retail collective coming out of the pandemic. Yep. So cool, the brand can go in there too. It all becomes, it is a marriage of being consistent, taking your time, doing right by relationships, understanding yourself, not necessarily waiting your turn, but just understanding when it's time to move, right? That's what all of this is, as far as like what open court can mean and hopefully will mean to artists and institutions here in the city.
For sure. We had talked offline a little bit about how open court for you is almost like a case study, in a sense, or like an experiment. What are some of the things of impact that you're hoping to see come of working with 15 plus artists and being able to build with them?
Yeah, so it's really important for us to understand, not just for myself and the artist, but also these spaces, right? There's kind of this thought that, like, with everybody's talking about, the metaverse and this, that, and the third, like, and everybody's watching Ready Player One, and everybody thinks that, like, the physical world is just like gonna just like
disappear.
Yeah, like dissipate. Like, we're not gonna use it anymore. It's like, no, like, we're still very much be here, and there will still very much be spaces, and there will still very much be, these things happening in the real world. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in figuring out how those things interact and how they play off each other. Like I said, specifically in this time where one isn't really at mass adoption yet. So for me, it's about the case studies are about figuring out like what is the role of the gallerist. You know what I mean? Like if smart contracts are replacing gallery agreements and gallery representation, what does that look like? Like what is it the value of the artist, or what is the value of the gallery to the artist? How does the artist use the gallery to create and the blockchain be an extension of the work as opposed to it feeling like the work only has to be on the blockchain? Like I think there's still a value in materiality. Again, it's the analog portion of the analog luxury mentality. It's like there's still going to be there's value with you all being in this room. I can't stress it's the time that we're living in right now. I do not take it for granted. You know what I'm saying? Like there's value in relationship and community and with us physically interacting with each other and physically walking into a space and seeing a work. Yep. But you can extend that experience with the use of technology. That's the luxury. So for me, it's about figuring out how these things start to interact and that tug and that pull, and how do you create an ecosystem where everything's kind of symbiotic and like everybody's still getting paid and everybody's still, telling stories together and everybody's still creating community impact. Like the thing I'm about trying to figure out now is like what the heck a DAO is. Like everybody's talking about DAOs. Like that's like 3, 4, 5 steps beyond, what I know of blockchain and NFTs right now, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, again, how do these ecosystems start to interact? How does this digital world start to interact with the physical world? You know what I mean? Like how do we start to leverage AR before we jump directly into VR? Like before everybody's actually walking around with Google Glass and Oculus headsets, like what does it look like for us to still kind of care about, the things that are around us? And I think that's going to be much more of a bridge that leads to that mass adoption that's going to happen in the next couple of decades. So for me, the case study is about that. Like, what is the role of a museum in this space? What is the role of a gallery in this space? What is the role of the curators at those spaces, within those spaces? In this space. And then again, how do artists start to apply their work into those spaces? And while leaning on the decentralization and protecting, their intellectual property and gaining, the financial benefits that come along with that as well. So for me, the case study is about really trying to do as much as we can to study all of that. I don't think it's going to be a ABC 1, 2, 3 plug and play type of situation, but we would definitely be able to say this worked for us. This might work for you. This didn't work for us. It didn't work for us, but it still might work for you. Like just to be able to have more information because the space is so new. And for me, I get very annoyed when people are only talking about the financial incentives of blockchain technology and NFTs. It's much more than a new financial system. It's much more than just a new way to exchange value. Like we're literally talking about fundamentally changing how humans interact with each other and how we exchange things. And for that to be lost on like, you can make $250,000 in a month. It's like, bro, like this isn't a get rich quick thing. We're talking about like, this is literally our generation's railroads. We haven't seen anything like this before outside of like, I guess the initial internet being created, right? So this is the next version of that. So for us to squander that specifically just thinking about like how much money you can have in your bank account is just like extremely wasteful in my opinion. And it's annoying to be honest. But that doesn't mean that you ignore it, right? Like it's a part of the ecosystem, but like, let's look at the ecosystem. Right. So it's not just about like trading coins and trying to flip and like, it's not like treating it like stock. Like I'm very much interested in not looking at it in relationship to USD. Like I don't want to think about it in relationship to USD. Like I want to know how much Ethereum I have. I want to know how much Bitcoin I have. And then when other people are seeing value in that thing or in the NFT or in that specific blockchain, I want to be able to figure out how to exchange value with that. I don't want to have to continue to convert back and forth between these systems because this one is supposed to be decentralized. You know what I'm saying? So there's gonna be interaction between the two. I'm interested in studying that interaction and seeing how interaction evolves. But I'm very interested in understanding like what's the infrastructure that's gonna be built over here in this Web3 space, and how do you leverage that to create more of those valuable things, whether they are digital assets, NFTs, coins, et cetera. And the tokenization of those things, building community, able to build journeys and tell stories, is extremely a part of what we're hoping to accomplish with Open Court.
For sure. You had mentioned that photography was one of the central mediums that you're stepping into with this first iteration. Do you see other mediums coming at play down the road, and what does that look like for you?
No, 1,000%. So we're starting with photography. I chose to start with photography just because it's my medium, And it's the easiest one for me to be able to understand and communicate and work with other photographers and figuring out the space and just kind of a place to kind of dip my toe in the water. But I'll have the opportunity again to put together 3 to 5, exhibitions within a year to 18 months time. So I'm definitely extremely interested in what it looks like for music. Very, very interested in figuring out, what does it look, what are the extensions of the experience for someone who has taken the time to become like an extremely crazy, good, like realism painter. Like what happens if we can take you off the leash of being, tied to those materials? So other visual arts, 100%. I'm definitely, I want us to touch as many mediums as we can, because again, it's just going to build that case study for people to understand like how these things can interact together. So that's 100% a part of it. It's not just all photography. It's not just going to be like, these kind of like digital JPEGs and PNGs that people are kind of using now. Like let's really dig into the arts part of it as well, right? Like, how do you take something that you painted, something that you drew, a photo that you made, and how do you create a digital experience around that? Like, what if it didn't, Like, I want to be able to give these artists the opportunity as a curator to be able to take the blinders off of themselves, because we get so stuck in our mediums and narratives and things we're comfortable with. This is a very infinite game and a very infinite opportunity as it relates to the metaverse, Web3, et cetera. So I'm extremely excited about figuring out what mediums are going to fit in and where and how. So I'm definitely kind of like chewing on that as well.
And so you talk about like wearing different hats and being in different spaces. As both curator and like artist, where do you see yourself like navigating and the leveraging between the two?
Yeah, I think there'll be times where for Tethered, which is the first exhibition that's happening here, I'll be showing work as well as working to develop kind of a story around the entire exhibit. And there'll be times where I'll be completely hands off and have just a curatorial responsibility. Like, what's the overarching narrative? What are we exploring? What are the pieces that we want to tie together? You know what I mean? And what are the stories? What artists do I feel will fit into whatever it is that we're exploring there? So for me, it's going to be, again, understanding the space, the place. All of these things are fundamental for me. You know what I mean? Like, whoever the next partner may be as far as space is concerned, it's like, okay, does it make sense for me to be a part of this as an artist? No? Cool. Let me figure out how I can find 3 or 4, artists to work with for this one and give them that experience, that same experience that I'm going to get with Tethered. So part of it is having to go through it so that I can know kind of what I'm going through, right? Like, you can't teach somebody to swim if you've never swam before. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So I'm looking to swim a little bit myself so that then I can, assist others. You know what I mean? Like what they tell you on the plane in case of emergency, put on your oxygen mask before, helping others. Like, it's like that type of situation.
Dope. Is there anything else that you would want to say to the people, and just as we navigate, as we close out here, and it's been a really exciting conversation. So.
Yeah, man. Hopefully this was valuable, to everybody who's here. I appreciate everybody showing up again. I don't know, man. I'm just excited. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. It's the end of 2021. Yep. There's a lot of it's so wild. And I'll give you guys a preview right now. Sorry for the people who are just listening, but the people in the room are going to get a little bit of preview of some of the merch that's going to be released tomorrow at Huga. But I think that there's, and then somebody said, matter of fact, I had a conversation with, who was I talking to? I was talking to someone either earlier today. Where was I at? I was talking to someone, and I forget who it was. I'm sorry for not crediting you. But they said, I was talking to the homie Correll. Shout out to Bird Pizzeria. They're opening today, matter of fact, 4 to 8. I was talking to my homie Correll, I think yesterday, and he said, the times are requiring you to spend your optimism differently. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people who are kind of very pessimistic, and a lot of memes. There's a lot of jokes about where we are as society and with people and politics and all those different types of things. But this is an opportunity again to be extremely optimistic about where we're headed. So in that same vein, I've literally been sitting on this idea for 3 years, but this is a regular beer glass, but I put together some graphics and it says half full on one side, flip it over, it says half empty. Just to go along with that saying of, do you see the glass half full or half empty? I haven't seen anything like this before. There are only, I think, 12 of these currently, so you might want to go out to Hookah and get you one tomorrow. But yeah, no, like it's for me, I just want everybody, I want to push that. I want to push a little bit more optimism, a little bit more community, a little bit more togetherness, not in blindness to the things that we exist in and are having to fight against, but in an effort to know that community is the only way that we'll get through those things. So that is my kind of like final message and what I would like to put out there, the last thing that I would like to say, I guess. So, but yeah, one more thing, new colorway of the hat that's on my head, exclusive to Locae. I'm not even gonna put this on the internet. You can only buy this one at Locae. It's black, it's yellow. If y'all know Hookah, they're all yellowed out. So super exclusive there. And then there's gonna be tote bags and tees, which are at the printer right now, which I'll pick up tomorrow. But they have the graphic that's on my hoodie right here. This hoodie isn't out yet. So yeah, it's got the Analogue Luxury logo on the front, and then on the back, it kind of has the logos that exist, everything that's these are kind of like the miniature logos of everything that is a part of Analogue Luxury, and them being kind of connected in like a celestial type of a sense. So you have me, this is my personal brand logo right here, so this is like my personal art. You have Open Court, the Open Court logo is here, and then you have Here and Doing Things, which is the podcast, centered by Analogue Luxury. Everything flows out of that mentality, so that's kind of the story behind this garment. Again, this hoodie won't be available, but there's a t-shirt version of this that's coming out and a tote bag version of this that's coming out to tell that story, along with these and a few other kind of like legacy things. This hat is in there. Each of these hats supports a different nonprofit, so proceeds go back to the Be More Foundation for this black and white version, which is an organization at West Charlotte that teaches students media literacy. So they teach them about driving their own narratives and what to look for in journalism and all that kind of stuff. Me and the Hookah team and the Locae team have not picked a nonprofit for this hat yet, but we will pick one and we will make an announcement. So yeah, these will be there, super exclusive, super limited. Drew has on the green one from the home show. That was the first one that I released. Hats are like super important to me. They kind of like have always been a part of my journey. I used them as like a marketing tool when I was working retail to like sell my photography. So yeah, the crown just kind of symbolizes the city logo, obviously flipped upside down, because again, community, being able to elevate the people or the things that are at our foundation, I think are what is going to push us forward. So I went ahead and just flipped that city crown upside down. Could also be potentially like distress, like you need some help, like they need us, like they need creativity, like to be able to keep this thing moving, that kind of a thing too. So yeah, that's a little bit of a preview for you guys for what we have, and yeah, that's it.
Appreciate y'all coming out.
Thank you.